Welcome. You've arrived at the edge of the day, and now something quieter is calling. Not a task, not a question, but a space. A space made just for you, soft as moss, still as a hidden pond in the forest. There's no more rushing here. No more fixing, only releasing, only resting. Let the weight of your day slide from your shoulders like leaves falling from a branch in autumn. You don't need to carry any of it now. You are safe. Your breath is here. Your body is here. This moment is enough. Tonight, you'll hear stories, not to awaken you, but to gently cradle your mind, to hush the thoughts that tug and pull. Each tale is a ripple on the surface of stillness, a calm stone placed in the stream of your awareness. Simple, quiet, like the sound of a bamboo stalk swaying in the night breeze. You don't need to understand them. You don't need to remember them. Just let them happen. Let them float through your awareness like passing clouds. As you listen, you may drift. You may forget where one story ends and the next begins. That's perfectly okay. That's the way of rest, the way of Zen. Just breathe, slowly, even slower. Let your body sink into whatever holds it. Let your thoughts unravel like silk threads in water. Tonight, there is no goal, only the gentle rhythm of presence, only the promise of peace. You are here now, and that is enough. So close your eyes and let us begin. Now that your breath has slowed and your body has begun to sink into rest, let us begin the first of many gentle tales. You don't need to follow every word. You don't need to remember the beginning or the end. These stories are like leaves on water, floating slowly across your mind. So let us begin with a story of patience. A story called The Bamboo That Waited. In a quiet village, nestled at the edge of a misty mountain forest, a boy named Ren lived with his grandfather. Their small wooden house, built from old pine beams, sat beside a still pond where dragonflies danced and reeds swayed in the soft breeze. Ren was young, eager, and full of questions. His grandfather, a former monk, was calm and deliberate, choosing his words as carefully as a gardener trims bonsai. One morning, as the sun broke gently through the morning fog, Ren approached his grandfather with furrowed brows. "Grandfather," he asked, "why does everything I try take so long? I plant seeds and they don't grow. I practice flute and the notes still crack. I try to sit still, but I feel restless after moments. Why must patience feel like punishment?" His grandfather smiled and beckoned Ren to follow. Together, they walked up a mossy path to a grove of tall bamboo, their stalks swaying gently, whispering in the breeze. "Sit," said the old man, settling beneath the tallest stalk. "Let me tell you about this bamboo." Ren sat beside him, legs crossed, curious. "This bamboo," the grandfather began, "was once nothing more than a seed. It lay in the earth for a long, long time. Each day, I watered it. Each day, I whispered encouragement to the ground. But for an entire year, nothing came up." Ren blinked. Nothing? Not a sprout, not a crack in the soil, yet I kept watering. Ren tilted his head. "Why?" The grandfather's eyes twinkled. "Because I knew what kind of bamboo it was. In the second year, still nothing. In the third, again, no sign of growth. Many would have thought the seed was dead, useless. But I continued, every day, gently, without doubt. And then," Ren whispered, "in the 5th year, the bamboo burst through the ground, and within weeks," the grandfather pointed upward, "it grew over 30 feet tall." Ren looked up in awe, following the long green stalks as they reached for the sky. "But how?" he asked. "The bamboo spent all those years growing inward, strengthening its roots, building a foundation. What appears as stillness is sometimes preparation." Ren was quiet for a long time. A gentle breeze rustled the bamboo leaves, their rhythmic dance almost like a lullaby. His grandfather placed a hand on his shoulder. "You too are laying roots," he said, "even when you can't see it, even when it feels like nothing is changing. Patience is not punishment, Ren. It's faith." Ren took a deep breath. The wind passed softly across his cheeks. He listened, not just with his ears, but with his whole being. The leaves, the pond, his own breath. It was all enough. From that day on, Ren practiced differently. He no longer demanded speed. He showed up, like the watering hand. He trusted, like the hidden seed. And though he couldn't yet play a perfect note, he knew something important had already begun to grow. As the wind quiets and the bamboo bows under the hush of night, the lesson of patience settles into our hearts. Let us now follow another thread of stillness, a story of a silent monk and the mountains that listened. Breathe in, breathe out, and step with me into the next tale. Long ago, in a remote valley where pine trees whispered to the sky, a young monk named Daito arrived at a secluded monastery. He was seeking something he couldn't quite name. Peace, perhaps, or clarity, or maybe the end of the noise that churned within him. The monastery was quiet. It sat on the shoulder of a great blue mountain, wrapped in clouds and silence. The abbot who welcomed him simply bowed and offered no questions, no rules, No teachings, just space. Daito was given a cell with no possessions but a floor mat, a water jug, and a window that faced the mountainside. For the first few days, he felt calm. He walked in the garden. He meditated. He listened to the wind curling through bamboo groves. But inside, the noise began to return. Thoughts churned. Regrets resurfaced. Memories he thought long gone echoed like distant drums. He tried to meditate harder. He fasted. He avoided the other monks. But the silence around him only made the noise louder inside. On the 10th day, he found himself standing at the edge of a cliff at sunrise. Below him, the clouds swirled like milk in a bowl. He felt small, lost, angry at his own mind. "Why won't it stop?" he cried. His voice echoed back from the mountains. "Stop, stop, stop." Frustrated, he shouted again, "Why can't I find peace?" The wind carried his words, and the echo returned, "Peace, peace, peace." Suddenly, something softened inside him. He sat down on a flat rock, folded his legs, and closed his eyes. For the first time, he didn't try to fight the noise. He didn't try to force it away. He just sat and listened. His thoughts passed like wind across water, ripples that came and went. Some were loud, some were soft, but he didn't chase them. Hours passed like minutes. When he opened his eyes, the sun had risen fully, spilling gold across the snow-dusted peaks. He breathed, and then he bowed to the mountain. That day, Daito didn't speak, nor the next. In fact, for an entire year, he remained in silence, not as a punishment, but as a gift to himself. He became known as the monk who listened to mountains, and those who met him often remarked, there was something in his gaze, something calm, vast, and clear, as if he had become the mountain itself. As the silent monk merged with the stillness of the mountain, so too can we return to the quiet within ourselves. Let go of the need to understand. Let go of the urge to follow. These stories are not maps. They are gentle winds brushing across the forest of your mind. Let us now wander into our next tale about an old lantern and the light it carried through the dark. The Lantern in the Wind. In a small temple nestled on the edge of a forgotten forest, there lived an elderly monk named Jorin. The temple was old, humble in its construction, and worn by time. The stone steps leading to its gate were smoothed by decades of silent feet, and the wooden beams creaked as though whispering stories of those who had once prayed beneath them. Jorin had lived there alone for many years. He tended the moss-covered stones, swept the pathways each morning, and lit a single paper lantern every evening before dusk. The lantern, soft and glowing, was placed on a hook just outside the temple's front gate. It was simple, just rice paper and bamboo, but its light carried warmth through the misty twilight that cloaked the forest. Travelers would sometimes pass by, tired and searching for shelter. The sight of the glowing lantern told them what they needed to know. They were welcome. Joran would make them tea, offer them rice and pickled vegetables, and sit beside them as silence folded over the room like a warm blanket. Some would speak, some would not, but all left feeling lighter than when they arrived. One day, a great wind came to the valley. It began as a breeze, soft and curious, brushing through the pine branches like a flute's sigh. But by evening, it had grown wild. Trees bowed under its force. Leaves swirled in chaotic spirals. Dust crept through every crack. It was as if the forest itself had decided to move. That night, Joran lit his lantern as always. He looked up at the sky, now thick with fast-moving clouds, and felt the pull of the wind tugging at his robe. He stood there for a moment, wondering if perhaps he should bring the lantern inside, but he left it where it always hung, dangling gently at the gate. "It is not my light to protect," he said quietly. "It is only my light to offer." And then he closed the gate. Inside, the wind howled louder. The walls of the temple groaned. Somewhere outside, a branch cracked and fell. Joran sat by the window, listening. In his lap, he held a small cup of tea. He did not worry. The tea was warm, the cup solid in his hands, and whatever would happen would happen. When morning came, the world outside was different. Leaves covered the paths like a blanket. The forest floor was torn with fallen branches. The sky was pale and weary, and the lantern was gone. Only the small iron hook remained, swaying slightly as though it still remembered the rhythm of the storm. Joran stood at the gate for a long time. He did not frown. He did not cry. He simply looked, breathing in the scent of broken pine and damp soil. Then he returned inside, and began sweeping the stones once more. Days passed. Travelers still came. But without the lantern, some passed by unknowingly, never seeing the temple in the folds of the trees. Others arrived late, stumbling in the dark. One asked, "Where is your light?" "It went with the wind," Joran said with a smile. "Will you hang a new one?" Joran only shrugged. Perhaps the wind needed it more than I. But that evening, when the last rays of sunlight kissed the roof, Joran did something unexpected. He took a piece of parchment and began to write. Not prayers, not scripture, just a memory. He wrote of the lantern, of its soft glow, of the people who had come, of the quiet way it had gone. Each night after that, he wrote again, not to replace the lantern, but to remember its warmth. Soon, the stack of stories grew, each page like a petal, each word like a flicker of light. Years passed. The wind returned again and again, but it never took the stories. The pages, stored neatly in a wooden box, remained untouched by the storms. And though no lantern ever hung again, people still found the temple. Somehow, they felt it, an invisible glow drawing them near. Some said they heard the whisper of a bell. Others spoke of a faint warmth, as if the trees themselves remembered. One young woman, a traveler with tired eyes and a worn satchel, asked Joran one evening, "Do you still believe in the light, even though it's gone?" Joran looked up from his tea. "Gone?" he echoed. "No, it only moved." "Moved where?" "Into everything that remembers it." That night, she asked if she could read the stories. Joran nodded and handed her the wooden box. She sat beneath the old pine and read until dawn. When she left behind her own page, a story of how the light had found her, even when it wasn't there. And so the box grew, one story at a time. It became a quiet beacon, not of light, but of memory, not of fire, but of reflection. And Joran, the monk who once lit a paper lantern at his gate, now lit mines instead, each one glowing silently as they walked into the world. And somewhere, perhaps very far away, a broken rice paper lantern still swings in the branches of an old cedar tree, still glowing in a way only the forest can see. The lantern may have vanished, but its glow still lingers in memories, in stories, in the spaces between words. Like soft wind moving through tall grass, some lessons are felt, not spoken. And now we wander into another tale about a teacup, a teacher, and the gentle truth of letting go. Breathe in slowly, breathe out gently. Let the next story pour itself into you, like warm tea into an open cup. The Overflowing Cup. In a quiet village nestled in a valley where mists floated like whispered thoughts and time moved without urgency, there lived a well-respected scholar named Haruto, known across the land for his brilliance in philosophy, history, and logic. Haruto had traveled far and wide, studying under masters, debating in courts, and collecting ancient texts like trophies. Despite all he knew, peace still eluded him. At night, Haruto's mind would not rest. It wandered through debates he had won, questions he could not answer, and a restless desire to know more, understand more, and above all, be right. One day, upon hearing tales of a monk who lived at the top of a distant mountain, Haruto decided he must visit. The monk, they said, taught no philosophy, held no degrees, and wrote no books. But those who sat with him often came back different, quieter, lighter. Haruto packed his scrolls, his best silk robe, and a satchel filled with ink and paper. He climbed the winding trails for hours, the air thinning with every step. When he reached the top, sweat clinging to his brow, he found a small hut surrounded by trees, moss-covered stones, and the scent of pine. The monk, a man named Daiji, was sitting beneath a gnarled tree, sipping tea from a clay cup. His robe was simple, his posture relaxed. His eyes, half closed, opened slowly as Haruto approached. "I've come to learn from you," Haruto announced, bowing stiffly. "I've studied the greatest minds in the land. I've read ancient scrolls from across the sea. I'm ready to understand the true essence of Zen." Daiji smiled. "Would you like some tea?" Haruto blinked. "Yes, but first, I must explain my background so you'll know how best to teach me." But Daiji was already inside the hut, preparing tea. Moments later, they sat across from each other. A clay teapot sat between them, still steaming. Daiji gently lifted the pot and began pouring tea into Haruto's cup. As he poured, Haruto resumed speaking. "I've read that Zen is the path beyond reason, yet I believe reason can help us access it if interpreted properly. I also believe the tea reached the rim of the cup." Daiji did not stop. Tea spilled over the edge, sliding down the cup and pooling on the wooden tray. Haruto stared, startled. Still, Daiji poured. "Master," Haruto cried, "the cup is full. It can hold no more." Daiji paused. He looked at Haruto with a calmness as smooth as the surface of a still pond. "And yet," he said, "you keep pouring." Haruto opened his mouth, then closed it. The hut grew silent. Outside, a breeze rustled the trees. Daiji placed the teapot down. "You have come full of answers, full of knowledge, full of yourself." Haruto looked down, embarrassed. "But isn't knowledge useful?" Daiji nodded. "Like tea, it warms you, it sustains. But if you never empty your cup, there will be no room for anything new, not even peace." The scholar sat in stunned silence. "I did not mean to offend," Haruto said softly. "I only wanted to understand." Daiji smiled again, not unkindly. "Then start by not knowing." That evening, Haruto remained at the hut. For the first time in years, he did not open his scrolls. He did not recite memorized verses. He simply watched the way steam rose from the teacup, curling like breath into the evening air. The next morning, He asked if he could stay longer. Days passed. Haruto helped sweep fallen leaves. He walked barefoot on dew-soaked paths. He sat in silence beside Daiji, sometimes for hours, saying nothing. The thoughts in his mind, so loud, so urgent, began to quiet. He realized how often he'd been speaking just to fill silence, reading to avoid stillness, collecting knowledge to hide his discomfort. One day, as they sat beneath the same gnarled tree, Daiji offered him tea again. This time, when the cup was full, Haruto placed his hands around it and whispered, "Thank you." Daiji nodded. "Now, drink." Haruto did. The warmth of the tea spread through his chest. He looked into the cup, half full now, and smiled. And in that smile was something he had not known how to seek: peace. When Haruto returned to the valley weeks later, people asked him what he had learned. He showed them no scrolls. He quoted no verses. He simply poured tea, waited for it to cool, and drank it slowly. And somehow, those who watched him felt as though they had learned something too. The teacup has been emptied, not of tea, but of certainty, of hurry, of noise. And in that empty space, there is room for peace to bloom. Let us now continue into the next story. A story of a simple wooden bell, forgotten by the world, but remembered by the wind. Close your eyes. Feel the hush of night around you, and let us begin. The Forgotten Bell. In a hidden corner of the forest stood a dilapidated bell tower, long forgotten by the people of the nearby village. Its wooden beams had begun to rot. The roof was caved in, and moss crept up the stones like time itself, wrapping its fingers around what once rang loud and proud. Inside the tower hung the bell. It was not large nor ornate. There were no inscriptions carved into its metal, no symbols etched into its base. It was plain, heavy, and quiet. But it had not always been that way. Decades ago, the bell would chime every evening. A monk named Daishin would climb the narrow stairs each night, pull the thick rope with steady hands, and let its sound roll across the valley. The bell's song would drift over rice paddies, down winding footpaths, and into every window of the village. It was not just sound, it was the sound of pause. A reminder that another day had ended, that rest was now allowed. The villagers called it the Bell of Return, for it was the cue that all things should return to peace. Tools were set down, arguments stopped mid-sentence, and even the children would sit still to listen. Then came a time of change. Daishin passed away quietly one spring. The monastery had no other monks. The tower was left to stand, but no one pulled the rope anymore. The village, without the bell, forgot to pause. Fields were harvested late into the night. People shouted over dinner. Slowly, the sound of stillness was replaced by the hum of movement. No one dismantled the tower. It simply stood, slowly dissolving into its surroundings. Yet, the bell remained. One autumn, many years later, a traveler entered the village. He was not old, but he walked with the pace of someone who had seen many dawns. His name was Kenji, a wandering teacher who sought quiet places to rest. Kenji stayed at the edge of the village and noticed something odd. Though it was a peaceful place, there was a current of tension in the air, like a string drawn too tight. People moved quickly, spoke quickly, and even their laughter seemed strained, as if they were already thinking of the next moment while in the middle of this one. One evening, Kenji wandered past the last house, where the fields met the trees. The wind brought with it a soft, metallic scent, faint and unfamiliar. Following it, he discovered the crumbling bell tower. He stepped inside. It was dark. Dust swirled in the shafts of twilight cutting through the broken roof. The bell hung above, wrapped in cobwebs, unmoved. Kenji sat beneath it. He didn't climb the stairs. He didn't try to ring it. He simply sat for a long time. The next day he returned, and again the day after that. Villagers noticed the quiet traveler sitting in the bell tower, unmoving, sometimes for hours. A child finally asked him, "What are you doing in that old place?" Kenji smiled, listening. "But the bell is broken," the child said. "Is it?" Kenji tilted his head. The child frowned, confused. "It doesn't ring." Kenji placed his hand over his chest. "Some things still ring here." That night, the child sat beside Kenji, and the next night, another joined them. By the end of the week, 5 or 6 villagers would gather at the tower as the sun dipped behind the hills. They said little, sometimes nothing at all. The silence, once heavy and strange, began to feel sacred. Then one evening, without a word, Kenji rose and walked up the stairs. The rope was worn, but still whole. He wrapped it around his hand, looked out over the fields, and pulled once. The bell sang. Its voice was not as strong as before. Rust had crept into its tone, and time had softened its echo, but it was enough. The sound rolled out, shaky at first, then smoother, like a memory remembered halfway through. The villagers stopped in their homes, in the streets, in their footsteps. They listened, and something happened. A woman set down her broom and closed her eyes. A father lowered his voice and placed his hand on his son's shoulder. An old man wept, remembering a time when he had first kissed his wife under the sound of that very bell. The bell rang twice more. Kenji came down the stairs. It was never truly broken, he said, only waiting. That night, the villagers walked back slowly. Some held hands, others walked alone, but with a softness in their step. The next evening, someone else rang the bell, and the next night, another. It became a ritual again, different from before, but no less sacred. Kenji left the village soon after. No one saw him go, but his presence remained, like a whisper in the wind or the low hum of a bell heard only by those who are still. Years later, the tower still stood. Worn, yes, but the bell still rang. And in that chime, the village remembered to pause, to return, to listen, to let go. The bell's final echo faded into the trees, but something lingered, a stillness, a knowing. Some sounds are not heard with the ears, but with the heart. Let us now journey onward to a small, quiet pond where the moon never misses a night, and where one man learned to stop chasing peace and let it come to him. Breathe in, breathe out. Let the water still, and let the next story begin. The lantern beneath the ferns. The forest was nearly silent now. Night had settled deeply over the mountain grove, and even the rustling of leaves had taken on a hush. Moonlight filtered through the tall trees, tracing soft silver ribbons across the forest floor. In a clearing, nestled between moss-covered stones and ferns that glistened with dew, sat a weathered temple caretaker named Kenji. His robe was simple. His hands were worn. His eyes, though old, were still bright like polished river stones. Each evening, Kenji would take a quiet walk around the outer grounds of the temple, a ritual not required by duty, but born of devotion. He called it sweeping the air, though he rarely carried a broom. The real work, he would say, was of the mind. On this particular evening, something unusual tugged at his attention. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling, like a forgotten note in a song that had suddenly returned. He stopped beneath a tall cypress, its trunk wide enough to hide 3 men behind. There, near the base, the underbrush had been disturbed. Kenji leaned in. Beneath a nest of fallen ferns and pine needles, something faintly shimmered. A lantern. Its frame was old, carved from wood, now softened by time. The rice paper panels, once white, were stained with age, but inside, protected from the elements, a candle still stood, untouched. Kenji lifted the lantern gently and turned it in his hands. There was no name, no markings, no clue as to how it had arrived here, and yet it felt familiar, not in memory, but in essence, as if it had been waiting for him. He didn't light it that night. He simply brought it back to the temple, cleaned it, and placed it on a windowsill where the moonlight could reach it. The next day, he asked the monks if anyone had lost a lantern. No one had. No visitors had been recently through the forest trail either. The mystery only deepened. But for Kenji, it was not a mystery to be solved. It was a presence to be honored. That week, something curious happened. Each evening, after Kenji returned from his walk, he would notice the lantern had changed slightly. One night, it smelled faintly of sandalwood. Another, the glass seemed clearer than before, though he hadn't touched it. Once, when he set it beside the incense burner, the smoke curled around it without touching, like it recognized an old friend. Kenji began to include the lantern in his evening meditation. He would sit across from it, just as he would face the moon and breathe. On the seventh night, as the wind gently whispered through the temple's open walls, Kenji lit the candle for the first time. The flame was small, gentle, but something within it stirred a memory. He remembered being a boy, standing at the funeral of his grandmother, clutching a paper lantern like this one, afraid to let it go into the river. She had taught him how to bow deeply, not just with the body, but with the spirit. How to listen not only to words, but to silence. How to sweep not only dust, but anger and worry from the corners of the heart. She had given him his first sense of peace, and that night, holding this old lantern again, he realized he had forgotten how deeply she had shaped him. The next morning, Kenji returned to the base of the cypress tree with the lantern in hand. He bowed to the tree, as if bowing to a teacher, and then, without ceremony or hesitation, he placed the lantern back beneath the ferns, exactly where he had found it. He left it unlit, but he walked away glowing. Something had been completed. Not a task, but a circle. The following night, a passing traveler took shelter near the grove. She was young, burdened, and her eyes were tired from the weight of unspoken questions. As she stepped into the clearing, her foot brushed the ferns aside, revealing the lantern. She paused. She picked it up, turning it carefully in her hands. And in that moment, she felt something lift inside her, like a story was waiting to be heard, but not told. She carried the lantern with her into the forest and disappeared quietly into the trees. Back at the temple, Kenji sat by the window again. The space where the lantern had been was now empty, but the peace remained. He closed his eyes and whispered softly to the wind, "Let every light find its traveler. Let every burden be laid down in silence. And let every forest carry one more quiet lantern home." The candle has dimmed, but its warmth still lingers in the space between breaths. Now, we journey deeper into the forest, where stories do not knock, but drift in like fog, quiet, unseen, and healing. The next tale waits beside a grove of bamboo and a single stone step. Let's follow the wind into a story called The Bamboo Grove and the Old Man's Step. In a hidden forest where the wind walked more often than people did, there stood a narrow grove of bamboo that seemed to hum when the night became still. The bamboo didn't grow in neat rows. It rose unevenly, some stalks tall and slender, others curved and cracked with age. But together, they swayed in a harmony that no human orchestra could replicate. At the center of this grove, there was a stone step, not a staircase, just one step, smooth, worn, resting on a bed of moss that had grown thick over the years. No one in the nearby village remembered who had carved it. Children believed it had fallen from the heavens like a forgotten piece of a temple. Adults often said it was a monk's seat from a time long past, but none dared move it. There was something sacred about the way it sat in silence, and every morning, before the sun climbed over the trees, an old man named Daisuke would come and sit on that stone step. He never spoke while he was there. He carried no cane, despite his slow gait. No book, no scroll, no tea, just a folded cloth for his knees and a breath that seemed to blend into the wind. To those who asked, he simply said, "I am here to wait for nothing." Children would sometimes hide behind the trees to watch him. They'd whisper and giggle, wondering if he was a ghost pretending to be alive. But Daisuke was no ghost. His eyes twinkled too much. His smile came too easy. One brave child once approached and asked, "Why do you sit here every day?" Daisuke looked up, gently motioned the child to sit, and said, "Because the bamboo remembers what I forget." The child didn't understand, but felt somehow that it was enough. Years passed. The village changed. Homes rebuilt. People moved. Electric lines came. But the bamboo grove stayed the same. And so did the stone step. And so did Daisuke. Even as his back bent further and his hair thinned into white mist, he continued his morning visits. Some days, he sat through rain. Other days, he sat in fog so thick he vanished from view. But always, he sat. And when villagers asked why, especially in his old age, he would smile and say, "The world outside is fast. The world here is slow. And sometimes I need help remembering which one is true." One winter morning, the villagers noticed Daisuke had not returned home from the grove. Worried, they searched the path, half expecting to find him lost or collapsed in the snow. But when they reached the bamboo grove, they paused. There, seated upright on the stone step, was Daisuke. His hands rested gently in his lap, his face tilted upward as if listening, and on his lips, the softest smile. He had passed peacefully, with the forest as his final witness. The villagers wept, not because he was gone, but because he had gone exactly the way he had lived, in stillness, in silence, in peace. They built a small wooden marker beside the stone step. No name, no date, just a single inscription carved in the smooth bark. He remembered the rhythm of stillness. Years later, travelers who happened upon the grove still felt something unusual there. Some said the wind moved differently between those bamboo stalks. Others said the moss felt warmer. A few even claimed that if you sat on the stone step long enough, you'd hear the forest breathe. One traveler, a woman in her 30s, came after losing her job and her sense of direction. She sat on the step and cried, not loudly, but in the way that only the trees could hear. When she rose to leave, she whispered, "Thank you, whoever you were." She didn't know it, but the bamboo bent ever so slightly as she walked away, as if bowing to her sorrow and her courage. Back in the village, no one replaced Daisuke. No one needed to. But from time to time, people would make the walk, especially during difficult seasons, and sit on the stone step, not to meditate, not to pray, not to find answers, but simply to sit. And slowly, the phrase he once spoke became a quiet greeting between villagers. "Are you going to wait for nothing today?" And the answer was often, "Yes, just for a while." The forest never asked anything of them, and yet it gave. It gave the rhythm Daisuke had remembered, not loud, not grand, but soft, like footsteps on moss. And in that softness, many found what they had forgotten. That peace is not a place you reach, it's a pace you return to. The step still waits beneath the bamboo, and though the old man is gone, his silence remains, whispering to those who listen, "Wait for nothing, and everything may come." Let's follow the trail deeper now, into the next story, where a flickering candle refuses to go out, no matter how dark the night becomes. breathe in, breathe out, and let the next story begin. The candle that kept flickering. In a mountain village where the stars blinked like slow thoughts and the wind moved with a certain memory, there lived an elderly woman named Hannah. She was known by everyone, but remembered by few. Not because they had forgotten her, but because she was never meant to be remembered loudly. She was the one who kept the temple lit at night. Each evening, after the monks had gone to their rooms and the chants had ended, Hannah would enter the main hall with a bundle of candles wrapped in silk. Her steps were slow, measured, and nearly silent, like leaves falling onto moss. She would place each candle gently on its stone plate, bow her head slightly, and whisper something under her breath, something no one ever heard, but everyone respected. And then, one by one, she would light them. The flames weren't bright. They didn't need to be. They were gentle enough not to compete with the stars. When asked why she still did it, even at her age, Hannah simply replied, "Because someone must remind the dark that it is not alone." There was one candle, though, that refused to stay lit. It was near the eastern window, placed on a cracked ceramic holder older than Hannah herself. Each night, Hannah would light it, and each night, just as she finished lighting the last candle, that one would flicker, once, twice, and go out. At first, she thought it was the breeze, so she closed the window. Still, it went out. She tried a thicker wick, a softer wax, a deeper holder, but the flame never lasted. One night, she paused in front of it and whispered, "Do you not wish to burn, little one?" Of course, it didn't answer. But for the briefest moment, as if responding to her voice, the candle sparked and flickered, and for the first time in weeks, it stayed lit. The next evening, it went out again. But this time, Hannah smiled, because it had lasted a little longer. So she made a promise. "Each night, I will light you. Even if you fail, even if you go out, I will be here again and again." And so began her ritual of patience. She called the candle Kibo, hope. The monks began to notice. "Why waste time on a candle that won't stay lit?" one asked kindly. Hannah replied, "Is it a waste to love something that flickers?" They didn't ask again. One evening, a storm rolled in from the north. The sky roared with thunder, and the temple shook as wind curled through its corridors. Most candles died that night, but not Kibo. It burned low, but steady, like a whisper that refused to be silenced. Hannah sat across from it the entire night, her knees wrapped in a wool shawl, her eyes never leaving the flame. When morning came, and the monks emerged to see the damage. They found her asleep beside the candle. Kibo still burned, quiet and faithful. From that day forward, none dared question the value of a flickering light. Years passed. Hana grew thinner. Her hands trembled more. Her walk slowed. But every night, she still lit Kibo. Sometimes it held, sometimes it didn't, but always she returned. Until one evening, she didn't. The monks found her the next morning, lying peacefully in her futon. Her expression was calm, eyes closed, lips gently parted, as though mid-prayer. They mourned, they gathered, they prepared offerings. And that evening, for the first time in decades, the temple was lit not by Hana's hands, but in her memory. The head monk lit each candle, trembling a bit with the weight of it all. When he reached Kibo, he hesitated. Then, bowing low, he whispered, "Let this flame honor your patience." He struck the match, and the candle caught instantly. It burned strong, steady, unwavering, and it did not go out. Not that night, not the next. Some said it burned for 7 days straight. To this day, pilgrims who visit the temple will hear of the candle that kept flickering. They will hear how it failed more than it succeeded, how it defied wind and weather and doubt, how it was given time and trust. And some say, when the temple is quietest, around midnight, you can still see Hana's reflection near the eastern window, watching, smiling, whispering something only the candle understands. Not every light needs to shine brightly. Some just need to keep showing up, even if they flicker, even if they fail, again and again, until one day they don't, and that is enough. The candle still stands, its flame now passed to you, soft, flickering, but persistent. Let us follow its glow down a quiet path to a garden where an old gardener learns that not everything must bloom to be beautiful. Take another breath in, let it out slowly, and step gently into the next story. The bamboo gate. At the edge of a forgotten forest, where stone paths gave way to moss and stillness, stood an old bamboo gate. It marked the entrance to a modest monastery that had no walls, only trees. The gate, though simple, held a quiet dignity. 2 curved poles, bound by worn rope, with no door to close. It did not keep anyone in or out, and yet those who passed through it felt a shift, like stepping into a quieter part of the world. A young traveler named Riku arrived at the gate one misty morning. He had been walking for days, burdened with questions he could not name and a weight he could not see. When he first saw the bamboo gate, he hesitated. There was no bell to ring, no guard to ask, no sign to guide him. Only the whisper of wind through pine and bamboo, and the soft crunch of his feet on the stone. He stepped through. Inside, the monastery appeared not like a place of worship, but a forest with rhythm. Trees were swept of fallen leaves. Stones were arranged in circles. A wooden platform held a kettle, always steaming with tea. And monks moved slowly, sweeping, sitting, tending to a garden of wild things. Riku found a quiet corner and sat. No one asked his name. No one asked why he came. Time passed as it does in such places, not measured, only felt. On the third morning, Riku approached the oldest monk, who was sitting cross-legged beside a stream, eyes closed, hands resting like still leaves on his knees. "I don't know how to let go," Riku said. The monk opened his eyes, but did not turn. "Let go of what?" Riku paused. "Everything. My thoughts, my past. What should come next, all of it." The monk motioned to the bamboo gate in the distance. "Walk to the gate," he said softly, "and open it." Riku looked at him, puzzled. "But it's already open. There's no door." "Then carry a door with you," the monk replied, "and open it when you get there." Riku frowned, unsure if the monk was mocking him, but something in the man's stillness made him obey. He stood and walked the winding path back to the gate. The mist was thicker now, wrapping the forest in dreamlike folds. He stopped at the bamboo frame, trying to imagine a door, one he could carry, one he could open. At first, he felt foolish, but then he saw it. The door he carried wasn't made of wood or bamboo. It was built from the need to control, the need to know, the need to decide what comes next and what must not return. He took a deep breath, and in his mind, he turned the handle. The moment he did, a breeze rose from the forest, not strong, just enough to stir his robe and make the leaves tremble. It was enough. That evening, Riku returned to the monk. "I opened it," he said, "the door I was carrying." The monk smiled, but said nothing. Riku sat beside him, listening to the stream, and slowly he realized letting go wasn't a moment of forgetting. It was a willingness to stop holding. The days passed with quiet rhythm. One morning, Riku was sweeping fallen pine needles near the gate when another traveler arrived. This one hurried, breathless, eyes darting. "Is this the place?" the traveler asked, "where they teach how to be calm?" Riku smiled gently. "It's not a place, but yes, it can begin here." The traveler looked confused. "So what do I do?" Riku pointed to the bamboo gate. "Walk through, and if you're carrying a door, open it." The traveler blinked. "There's no door." Riku just smiled. Exactly. As the night deepens in the forest, the bamboo creaks softly in the wind. The gate stands still, never closing, never keeping, only reminding that the door you must open is the one you've been carrying all along. And when you do, even the wind will feel lighter. Sometimes we walk with burdens we cannot name, but the forest, like truth, asks nothing from us. Let us now step into the next tale, where a lantern's light reveals what we're ready to release. The thread in the trees. In the northern valleys of a vast green land, where mist lingers long into the morning and trees speak to each other with the rustle of leaves, there was once a young woman named Emmy. She was a weaver by trade, her fingers swift and steady, her tapestries sought after in nearby villages. But lately, her hands had slowed. It wasn't age. Emmy was just 23. It was something else. Each morning, she'd sit by her loom, the forest outside her window sighing gently, the light soft and gold. But her mind no longer quieted. Her fingers would hesitate. A thread would snap. A pattern would unravel. One morning, she set her shuttle down and stood up. She packed a small cloth bag, left a note for her father, and stepped into the forest barefoot. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she needed to listen. Emmy walked for hours. The forest was familiar. She had grown up beside it. But this time, she did not walk the trail. She let her steps follow instinct, like water following gravity. She crossed a narrow creek where the moss glowed beneath her toes. She passed old trees twisted with age, their bark layered with green velvet. She drank from a hollowed-out rock where rain had gathered. And then, as the light began to fall softer through the leaves, she found something unexpected. A thread. It was red, thin as silk, hanging from a branch of a pine tree like it had grown there. She reached up and touched it. It swayed, light as a spider's web. Without thinking, she began to follow it. The red thread wove gently through the forest, sometimes rising above her head, sometimes drooping low near the roots of trees. It never broke. It wrapped around trunks, ducked under fallen logs, circled stones. Emmy followed. Hours passed. The air grew cooler. She noticed something peculiar. The further she followed the thread, the quieter her thoughts became. Not because the forest grew silent, but because her mind did. She wasn't wondering where it led. She wasn't worrying about how to get back. She wasn't even thinking about the weaving she left behind. She was simply following. As dusk painted the canopy in amber shadows, the thread led her to a clearing. In the middle, stood a single, small shrine, simple stone, weather-worn, covered in moss and silence. The red thread was tied in a neat knot around one of its corners. Emmy bowed slightly. She didn't know why. It felt right. She sat beside the shrine, cross-legged. The forest breathed around her. Fireflies appeared, blinking gently like the stars beginning to show above. Then she did something she hadn't done in weeks. She closed her eyes and did not think. She awoke the next morning with her head rested against the stone of the shrine, her body warm despite the night's chill. The red thread was still there, but now it trailed in another direction, back into the trees. She smiled and followed. For 3 days, the thread guided her. It never led to danger, only to stillness, to pools of water so clear she could see her thoughts dissolve in them, to branches where birds perched quietly, watching her as if they remembered her, to rocks warmed by the sun, perfect for resting, to wind-carved hollows that whispered forgotten stories. Each night, she found a new knot tied around something sacred, a tree with bark smooth as skin, a stump with mushrooms glowing faintly, a stone worn down to a perfect oval. And each time she sat beside the thread, she rested, deeper than sleep. On the 4th morning, Emmy reached the edge of the forest. The red thread stopped there, tied to a single reed of tall grass, waving in the early wind. Beyond it, she saw the trail that led home. She looked down at the thread. It had guided her, not away from her life, but back to the place inside herself where she once lived quietly, back to the still hands, back to the quiet loom, back to the rhythm of breath. She untied the last knot. The thread fluttered and disappeared like mist. She turned, bowed once to the trees, and walked home. When she returned, her father was sitting on the porch. He didn't ask questions. He simply brought her tea. Later that day, Emmy sat by her loom again. Her fingers did not rush. They remembered. Each movement, each line, each silence between knots felt like the forest's rhythm. And in her next tapestry, she wove something she had never done before, a thread of red silk running through the heart of the design, not as decoration, not for attention, but as remembrance. A line that said, "You can get lost, but you can be found too." And so, if tonight your thoughts wander too far, or your hands feel lost, remember this: there is always a thread in the trees. You may not see it yet, but it is waiting, and it will guide you back. Sometimes, the path back to ourselves is not a straight one. It bends gently through branches, soft moss, and moments of pause. Let us walk now into the next tale, where even a cup of tea becomes a window into the present. The tea that wasn't rushed. In the heart of the hills, where fog kissed the mountain's edge each morning and cedars leaned close like old monks sharing secrets, there stood a humble tea house known to few. It had no sign, no menu, no set hours. People arrived when they needed to, and the tea was always ready. The owner of the tea house was a man named Kojiro. He had once been a businessman in the city. Sharp suits, sharper deadlines. But one day, in the middle of closing a deal, he had simply walked out of the building, boarded a train, and never returned. The city forgot him. The forest remembered. Kojiro built the tea house with his own hands, plank by plank, guided only by the rhythm of the wind and the quiet logic of trees. It wasn't perfect. The floors creaked, the paper windows swelled in the rain, but the fire never went out, and the kettle was always warm. Locals whispered that his tea was not like any other, that it changed flavor depending on your heart. Some said it healed sadness. Others said it gave clarity. A few claimed it brought back dreams they had forgotten, but Kojiro never promised anything. He only said, "Drink slowly." One evening, a woman named Sora arrived at the tea house. She looked tired, not in the way of the body, but the soul. She wore no jewelry, no watch, no cosmetics, only a plain jacket and a look of quiet ache. Kojiro greeted her with a silent nod. She nodded back. No words were exchanged. None were needed. He gestured to the low table by the window. She sat. Outside, rain began to fall in silver threads. Inside, Kojiro moved with a pace that some would call slow, others would call precise. He filled a small clay pot with leaves that smelled of warm stone in late summer. He poured the first water, not to drink, but to wake the leaves. Then another, then a third. Only after that did he pour for her. A tiny cup, no handle, no decoration, just warmth. Sora held it with both hands and did not sip. She just felt the heat. For once, she didn't reach for her phone, didn't check the time, didn't think of the meeting she missed or the fight she had last week, or the long, echoing silence from someone she used to love. She just breathed. The first sip was strange, not in taste, but in memory. It reminded her of the creek behind her grandmother's house, of a late summer afternoon, of sun through laundry, of silence and not being afraid of it. She drank slowly. Kojiro poured again. The second cup was darker, not in taste, but in truth. A tear welled in her eye, not sadness, release. She didn't wipe it away. Outside, the rain became softer, like the sky had exhaled. Inside, the fire crackled gently. Kojiro did not speak, but he sat with her. Like a stone sits with moss, like a tree stands near another tree. No performance, only presence. 3 cups later, Sora placed her hands on the table and bowed low. Kojiro returned the bow. When she rose to leave, she reached into her pocket for money. He held up a hand. She paused. He said only, "You already paid." She didn't understand, but she nodded. Outside, the rain had stopped. The forest smelled of forgiveness. She walked home in silence. And that night, for the first time in many months, she slept without waking. Years later, Sora would tell her children about the tea house. They would ask where it was. She would smile and say, "You don't find it by map. You find it when you stop hurrying." And she would make tea in silence, just as he had. Meanwhile, in the hills, Kojiro continued brewing. He never rushed, because the tea was never just tea. It was stillness. It was warmth. It was the sound of rain before words. And if you ever find yourself wandering those hills, you may come upon a place that seems to rise out of mist, and a man who offers no smile, but all the comfort of one. He'll pour you a cup and say nothing, because what you need, you already brought with you. The tea is only the mirror. And so, as we let the warmth of the teacup linger in our hands and hearts, we follow the steam into the next tale. A story of a lantern and a lesson in the light it never reached. The lantern that was never lit. In a forgotten corner of a bamboo forest, beyond a winding stone path, there sat a small moss-covered shrine. Most travelers passed it by, mistaking it for a ruin. The torii gate was cracked, the roof sagged under fallen leaves, and the prayer bell no longer rang. But one thing remained untouched: a lantern. It sat on a pedestal near the entrance, round, wooden, perfectly carved, yet curiously unlit. Not once in anyone's memory had a candle flickered inside it, and yet it glowed, not with flame, but with presence. An old monk named Kenta lived nearby in a thatched hut. Each morning, he swept the stone path that led to the shrine. Each evening, he sat beside the lantern and offered silent prayer, not to any god in particular, but to the stillness that lived between breaths. One summer, a young traveler named Aya came through the forest. She was searching, not for treasure nor fame, but for peace. Her life in the city had grown too loud, too fast, and too full. Even her moments of silence were hurried. When she saw the path, overgrown yet oddly inviting, she followed it and found the shrine and the lantern and Kenta. He didn't greet her with words, just a nod, a smile, and a gesture to sit beside him. She sat. The forest sang around them, wind brushing leaves, a distant stream murmuring like an old lullaby, birds calling softly as the sun began to fall. They watched the lantern. It didn't flicker, but it pulsed like a breath. After some time, Aya finally asked, "Why is it not lit?" Kenta answered gently, "Because it already shines." Confused, Aya looked closer. The lantern was indeed glowing. Not like fire, not like electricity, but like a quiet memory you forgot you had. She stayed the night in a spare futon the monk provided. In the morning, she asked again, "Why do people come here?" Kenta replied, "To be reminded." Of what? That the light is not always outside. Over the next few days, Aya helped tend the garden, mend the shrine's roof, and carry water from the stream. She spoke little, but thought much. Each evening, they sat before the unlit lantern. Each time, it felt different. Sometimes it felt warm, other times cool, sometimes heavy, like grief, sometimes light, like laughter. One night, unable to contain her question, she blurted out, "What is that lantern?" Kenta chuckled. "It is a mirror." She frowned. He clarified, "It reflects what you bring." Aya stayed longer than she planned. The forest became a rhythm. Wake, walk, sweep, sip tea, sit in silence. The outside world felt like a fading dream. Then one morning, as she was preparing rice, Kenta said, "It is time." "For what?" she asked. "To light the lantern." She froze. "But you said it doesn't need to be lit." He smiled. "Exactly." She waited for more. He only handed her a match. That night, after the sun had sunk behind the hills and the forest held its breath, Aya stood before the lantern with trembling fingers. She struck the match. The flame danced. She brought it to the lantern and paused. Inside was no candle, only emptiness. She looked at Kenta. He nodded. She placed the flame inside anyway, and the match burned out. Darkness returned, but something inside her glowed, brighter than fire. They sat in silence once more, but now she understood. The act of lighting was never for the lantern. It was for the heart, for the motion of offering, for the stillness that follows. The next morning, Aya bowed deeply to Kenta. "I have no gift to leave," she said. He replied, "You already left what matters, your attention." She hugged him, tears warm on her cheeks, and then, like all things, she departed. Years passed. Aya built a small tea house at the edge of a mountain village. No signs, no menu, only one rule: silence during the first cup. In the corner, she kept a lantern. It was never lit, but everyone said it glowed. As the memory of the lantern fades gently into our dreams, we follow a soft footpath deeper into the forest, where an old pine and a young bird wait to remind us that growth sometimes comes in stillness, not motion. The still pond. In the shadow of the northern mountains, where wild grasses whispered and the winds carried the scent of cedar and sage, there lay a pond. Not just any pond, but a still pond. One so calm that the sky itself seemed to pause before laying its reflection upon the surface. The villagers nearby had many names for it. Some called it the quiet eye, for it seemed to watch without judgment. Others called it heaven's bowl, because clouds, stars, and moonlight gathered there more purely than anywhere else. But most just called it the still pond, and that was enough. No one fished in it, no one swam in it, and no one threw stones into it, even children. Something about the way it was asked you to leave it be. It was said that those who truly looked into it would see not just their face, but the shape of their unrest, and that's why many avoided it, except for one. An aging basket weaver named Jun visited the pond every day. He came not to meditate, not to pray, not to seek visions. He simply came to sit. After a long morning weaving reeds into strong, round baskets, June would walk the winding trail, lean against a gnarled cypress tree beside the pond, and sip tea from a wooden cup. His hands were worn, his back slightly curved, but his eyes were bright with something the villagers didn't quite understand. They said he was a little strange, always smiling, always quiet. But when someone lost their way or lost their temper, it was often June who helped them find their center again. Not with advice, just with silence. One autumn afternoon, a young man named Haru found himself pacing by the pond's edge. His heart was clenched with questions about life, love, and whether he was wasting both. He didn't know June was already there, watching from the shade of the cypress. After several minutes of tense muttering and frustrated sighs, Haru spotted the older man. "You come here every day," Haru said, not unkindly. June smiled. "Yes," he said simply. "Why?" Haru asked. "To watch the pond." "That's it?" June nodded. Haru sat down heavily beside him. "I came looking for answers," he admitted, "but all I see is water." June looked at him for a moment, then turned back to the pond. "Then keep looking." They sat in silence for several long minutes. Birds called softly from the trees. The wind brushed the surface of the water, but only just. Leaves floated gently, like forgotten thoughts. Then June spoke. "You know why the pond is still?" Haru shrugged. "Because there's no river feeding it?" June shook his head. "Because it does not chase." Haru frowned. "What do you mean?" June leaned forward and picked up a leaf. "When the wind comes, it lets the ripples pass. It doesn't hold on to them. It doesn't try to make them stay. And so, it returns to stillness." He dropped the leaf onto the water. It made the smallest of ripples, then disappeared. "You," June said, "are chasing your ripples." Haru sat with that thought. He didn't fully understand, but a part of him, deep beneath the questions and noise, felt it. Over the next week, Haru returned to the pond each day. At first, he paced, then sat, then breathed. On the fourth day, he noticed that the pond's surface reflected more than the sky. It reflected him, but not his face, his posture, his stillness, his size. It began to show him the shape of his own inner waters. Some days choppy, some days clear, some days cloudy with emotion. One evening, just before sunset, Haru asked June, "Will I ever find what I'm looking for?" June didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked, "What happens when you stop looking?" Haru paused. "I'm not sure." June smiled. "Then perhaps that is worth discovering." That night, Haru dreamed of the pond. Only this time, he wasn't watching it. He was it. Every thought that passed was a ripple, every emotion a breeze, and the stillness, the deep, infinite stillness, was always there, just below the surface, waiting. Years later, Haru became a teacher in the village, not of mathematics, not of literature, but of quiet. He would take students to the edge of the pond and say, "Look, not to find, but to see." Some understood, others didn't, but all felt something shift. The pond never changed, but they did. One winter, when June passed away, Haru was the one who carved a small stone to place beside the tree where June once sat. It bore no name, only a symbol, a single circle carved into its face. And beneath it, 2 words, "Still here." The surface of the pond may grow still once more, but within us, the echo of its calm remains. Now, let us follow a soft trail of fallen leaves to a story about a willow that wept, not from sadness, but from love. The willow that wept with joy. In a quiet corner of the temple gardens, there stood a willow tree, not as tall as the pines, not as proud as the cypress, but it had a presence, soft, graceful, and unmistakably alive. Its long, slender branches arched downward, brushing gently against the surface of a koi pond below. In the breeze, they swayed like threads of silk in the wind. Monks and visitors often passed by the willow on their way to morning meditation. Some bowed to it, others whispered blessings. A few simply paused and sighed, feeling an unnamed peace settle in their chest. They called it the weeping willow, but not for sadness. No, this willow wept from something else entirely. Long ago, when the tree was still young, the temple was home to a monk named Rio. He was quiet, even among monks, a man who spoke rarely but listened deeply. His presence was said to be like still water, unassuming yet clear. But Rio carried something he rarely showed: grief. Years before, during a time of famine, he had lost his younger sister. They had been close, two reeds growing from the same riverbank. When she passed, Rio entered the monastery, seeking not only peace, but release. For years, he meditated under the branches of the young willow. Day after day, season after season, he found comfort in the way it bent but never broke, how it flowed without force, how its shade offered coolness even when the sun burned harsh above. But still, his grief remained. One spring morning, while sitting beneath the tree, Rio opened his eyes and saw something strange. A single tear-shaped drop falling from one of the branches, though the skies were clear and dry. He touched it. It wasn't water. It was sap, warm, golden, and fragrant. He looked up. More drops glistened at the ends of the lowest tendrils. "Are you weeping too?" he whispered. The willow, of course, gave no reply, but Rio felt something shift. It was the first day in many years that he did not feel alone in his sorrow. From that day forward, Rio began to speak softly to the tree. He did not ask for answers. He simply shared his memories of laughter, the songs his sister used to hum, the games they played with folded paper boats. He poured his heart out slowly, like tea cooling in an open cup, and the willow listened. Over time, Rio noticed something strange. The more he spoke, not of pain, but of love, the more sap the tree seemed to shed. But these were not tears of sorrow. They came when the sun was warm, when the birds sang brightly, when children from the village visited and laughed near the pond. The tree wept in moments of beauty, moments of presence, moments of joy. It wept not from burden, but from overflow. One afternoon, Rio stood before the tree and said, "I thought only humans wept, but you've shown me even trees feel." And perhaps it was only imagination, but in that moment, a breeze passed, and the willow's branches caressed his cheek like a tender hand. Years passed, Rio grew older, slower, but he never stopped sitting with the willow. He came in the mornings to share his gratitude. He came in the evenings to reflect on his breath. And as his steps grew smaller, the space within him grew wider. Grief had not left him, but it had changed. Where once it was heavy and sharp, now it was soft and round, like the smooth stones resting beneath the pond. One winter, Rio did not come. Snow fell quietly. The koi pond froze at its edges. The willow remained still. The monks found Rio in his small room, seated in meditation, his final breath a gentle exhale. There was no tension in his face, only peace. They buried him near the tree he loved. And that spring, something remarkable happened. The willow bloomed. It had never done so before. Small white blossoms, like flakes of early snow, appeared on its upper branches, dozens of them, and beneath the blossoms, sap formed once more. Golden tears. But no one saw sadness, only grace. From then on, the monks told visitors a new story, that the willow did not weep because it was wounded, but because it had once loved so deeply it could no longer contain it, that its tears were not grief, but remembrance, not pain, but presence. And that, perhaps, is the truest kind of joy. To this day, travelers who sit beneath the willow often report the same feeling, a sudden stillness, a gentle ache behind the eyes, a breath caught in the chest, and then a release. As if the tree, without speaking a word, reminds them, it's okay to feel this deeply. It's okay to let go. Some say that Rio's spirit lives in the tree. Others say it simply honors him. But all agree, the willow does not weep alone. It weeps with us, in joy, in beauty, in the silence of being truly seen. And now, the stories have come to rest. The last ripple has vanished from the still pond of your mind. You have walked through forests lit by moonlight, sat with monks beneath ancient trees, listened to soft bells echo through mountain temples, and breathed with the rhythm of the earth. Each tale, a step closer to stillness. Each pause, a doorway to your own breath. There is nothing more to chase now. No thoughts to resolve, no memories to untangle, no future to plan. Only this moment. Only the hush between heartbeats. Only the night whispering back. You may notice a gentle weight pulling your body downward. That is not fatigue. It is peace, returning home. A long exhale from the soul. Allow yourself to release. Not just the tension in your muscles, but the tension in your mind. The stories you carry, the names you repeat, the expectations. the regrets, the questions. Let them fall like leaves from an autumn tree. Let them drift slowly, beautifully, back to the earth. There is no need to understand everything. Sometimes the teaching is not in words, but in the feeling left behind. A still garden, a flickering lantern, a smile behind closed eyes. That is enough, more than enough. Perhaps tonight, you found a piece of yourself you had forgotten, a softness you once buried, a silence that once frightened you, but now welcomes you like an old friend. If you cried, that was your heart stretching. If you smiled, that was your soul remembering. And if you simply breathe deeply, then you have already done more than enough. Now, let the world take care of itself for a while. Let the earth spin without your help. Let the stars shimmer without your questions. Let the forest breathe around you. Let the night carry you. There is nothing to do, nowhere to go, nothing to fix, nothing to prove. Your presence is enough. Your stillness is sacred. You are held. You are safe. You are loved. So as you close your eyes, and the stories become dreams, and the dreams become silence, may the peace of the forest dwell within you. May the breath of the wind soften your thoughts. May the kindness of the trees remind you of your own. And when morning comes, gently, slowly, may you rise lighter than you slept, with calm in your chest, with gratitude in your hands, with clarity in your eyes. Good night, gentle soul. Rest well, let go, and let the world dream with you.